Gabe, you ready? So we're on, huh? Good morning. It is, as Larissa pointed out, it's good to see that we have an elementary school dance going on today. Everybody's like separated. But we're here, right? Obviously new faces up front today. My name's Rich Ball. I'll let Larissa introduce herself. We're going to go through last week's reading. We're going to primarily cover Mark. We're going to work with Mark this morning. I know we did some Exodus and some Psalms, but our focus will be on Mark. So I'll let Larissa introduce herself, and we'll go from there.
I am Larissa Burden, married to Chris sitting over there. We have 2 children together, and I teach special ed at New Bremen High School.
I am married to Andrea Ball. That's my better half, or 3/4, or whatever you call that. But we'll go from there. So let's open up with a word of prayer, and then we'll get started. Dear Heavenly Father, God, we do, again, just thank you so much for the opportunity to gather together, whether it be here physically or online, Lord. But we do just want to thank you for the opportunity to study your word together, to worship you together. And we just pray for your Holy Spirit to be able to use the words this morning, just everything that we do to bring you glory and to bring others to you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So just a kind of brief, because we're going to spend so much time in Mark this morning, kind of just wanted to go over Exodus a little bit. Does anybody have anything that stood out to them from the reading in Exodus that you want to share this morning? By the way, I wasn't here last week, so I don't know if we had it, but I know the weeks before that I was here, it was a wired mic. Guess what? No wire, so I can come to you this time, so nobody gets out just because you sat far away from the front. Does anybody have anything that just really stood out from our reading in Exodus? Okay. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
You know, I was telling, well, I don't know if I speak. I was telling Reed on the way over here, I was reading, like in the first chapter, how about, how do I want to say this? About when the Israelites was in the Egyptian slavery, and they was just kept being pushed into slavery, making them work harder. But I was looking down in my footnotes, and we was talking about becoming an overcomer. And that's what the Israelites was becoming good overcomers. But they put in the footnotes, we can't becoming overcomers if we don't have anything to overcome. So if our life is just real smooth, we're not going to grow. But if we have something to overcome, it's going to make us a better people, what Jesus wants us to be. So that's what I've got from that. So
Great. Thanks, Mark. Anybody else? Oh, Heidi?
I have no answer to this part. It was just
what the last few times I've read through Exodus, or the last few times I've read through a few things, I've just been questioning how God doesn't seem to have a problem with slavery. He doesn't seem to have a problem. He has a problem with slave masters being like harsh and slaves not listening, but he doesn't seem to have a problem with slavery. So my Western mindset goes, that's not right. That can't be good. But throughout Scripture, it talks about us being his slaves. And so, like I said, I have no answer. It's just all these thoughts that aren't quite connected to anything grounded yet. It's just more of a, okay, Abba, you've switched my mindset for a little bit right here. Let's sit there together, and I'm allowed to yell at you and question you, and you're allowed to say, yeah, you'll understand someday.
Thank you, Heidi. Anybody else? All right. So Exodus, just some of the points. Obviously, it started out, as Mark talked about, with basically the growth of Israel, right? After Joseph, they started multiplying and multiplying. It made Pharaoh nervous, so then they became enslaved, just to kind of slow them down there. Then Pharaoh made those statements about killing all the boys, and we know the story of Moses, that God had favor there and ended up keeping Moses there. Then what does Moses go and do? He goes and kills somebody. So he ends up running, which ends up leading him into his marriage. Then he ends up getting his call at the burning bush, right? And I know, there is so much more in between all of this. These are just some of the points throughout the reading. So Moses, God puts a call on Moses' life at the burning bush, gives him all the signs so that he can tell the Israelites, no, this is for real. It's coming from God. It's not just me. I'm not a sorcerer. Then he goes to Egypt. God hardens Pharaoh's heart. Then we get all of the plagues, the 10 plagues, up through the reading. This week, we got to where the plague for the firstborn was announced. It has not been executed yet, but we got all the way through the blood, the frogs, the gnats. I don't know if you picked up on it or not, but whenever I was reading that, I noticed the blood, the frogs, and the gnats, all of Pharaoh's sorcerers were able to duplicate it. But from the gnats forward, they couldn't pull it off. The flies, the livestock, the death of the livestock, the boils, the hail, the locust, the darkness. As you pick up on the darkness, it was a darkness that could be felt. You could feel it. It was so dark you couldn't see anybody around you. It was a darkness that was felt. It wasn't just dark. And then obviously the announcement of the firstborn. What I found also interesting, just for my own thought, was Pharaoh always tried to pull get close. I'll almost give you what you want. Is that going to be enough? And it never was enough, was it? So just some interesting points there. If you have something, okay. So with that, we went through several Psalms also. Just some high levels from chapter 7. We talked a little bit, and this is Mark. I'm sorry, we're jumping to Mark now. Anybody had any other thoughts or questions on Exodus? Got two going.
Just a couple of things that stood out to me that had been pointed out. I didn't come up with these, but when I read through Exodus, these jump out at me. One, when Pharaoh, his heart is hardened throughout some of these instances, and then along the way, God hardens his heart. And that's a hard thing for your mind to wrap around, but it just speaks to me that you can ignore God for a while, and then after a while, God will allow you to continue on that path, and he'll help you along too. So, be careful that you don't ignore God. He's gonna lead you to him, but if you keep ignoring him, he'll just allow your heart to go the way that you keep going. So, and then the other thing that had been pointed out to me before was the Pharaoh sorcerers and magicians were able to duplicate the plagues. If they were so great, why didn't they turn them around? Why didn't they make the things disappear, clear up the blood? They just made it worse by duplicating it.
Thank you. Chris?
I think for me, what has stuck out for a long time, and it's kind of like Heidi said, I don't know what the answer is, but I always sort of felt like there was a bait and switch component to when God said to Moses and Moses said to Pharaoh, we just want to go worship God in the wilderness. That it always felt to me like that sounds like we're just going to go out for a couple weeks and have a big worshiping ceremony and then come back. Like I never quite got why the going out into the wilderness to worship meant we're leaving forever. Like if Pharaoh still kept struggling with, like why did Pharaoh struggle with, well, if they're just going to go for a couple weeks and come back. I still don't quite get how that connects to we're out of here. But I also feel like even if it is just a bait and switch, that it's another evidence for me of how God in his word is always writing to people and about people, both to people and about people who are messing up, like what was continuing on from Genesis of Abram, Isaac, and Jacob always being people who were liars and cheaters and, deceptive in how they were dealing with the people around them. That somehow I always find that very encouraging, that we are not part of a holier than thou tradition in Judeo-Christian history. We are part of a people who have always messed up and always been only ever partially what God would call us to be. And I'm really thankful for that, but I also still don't get how when they were going out to worship, that meant they were leaving Egypt forever.
Thank you, Chris. Does anybody have any other thoughts on any of that? Speaking of traditions, Mark chapter 7, it speaks a lot about traditions, doesn't it? It starts out pretty much there about Jesus talking to them about you are just wrapped up in your traditions and you're not really, your heart's not in it, basically. So go from there. Chapter 8, he's not giving any more signs. So the question is, are you paying attention to what God's doing around you? Or are you still waiting for signs? Right? And will a sign be enough anyway? Those types of things going on there, it seems to be the question. Chapter 9, second time Jesus predicts his death. And what did the disciples do? I noticed this they did it more than once throughout this reading. They argued with, well, which one of us gets to be better than the other one? Basically, where do I get to sit? Jesus talked about not making others stumble. Chapter 10 talks about the children, the rich man. Again, he predicts his death a third time. And then again, the disciples are trying to outdo each other in chapter 10. Chapter 11, Jesus enters Jerusalem, cleans out the temple. And then this is where we start getting, in Mark's account, where the priests start conspiring to kill Jesus. Chapter 12 is where he starts with the parables, gives us the most important commandment, and then also gives a caution about paying attention to who you're following. 13, signs of the end times, the persecution, to be steadfast. And I noticed he was still showing mercy through a couple of things that went on in there. and only the Father knows exactly when. Chapter 14, the Last Supper, betrayal predicted, Peter's denial, Gethsemane, where he prayed to see if it was the Father's will that this cup would pass from him. He was arrested, stood before the Sanhedrin, and then what did Peter do? He disowned him. And 15, before Pilate, the call for crucifixion, the death of Jesus, and the burial. 16, resurrection. Jesus appears to many in the ascension. So those are just, again, I'm not giving you that as an exhaustive. Those were just some bullet points to pull out to help trigger your mind this morning. If you've been keeping up with the reading, those things will trigger for you. What we want to do now, we're going to spend a little bit of time in discussion around your table. If you're sitting there by yourself like Tom is, you might want to jump in a table with somebody. We'll save this one for those of you online. I'll let Larissa read that in a minute. But there's a sheet of paper or half a sheet of paper on your table. And what we'd like to do is have you kind of discuss the topic, jot down some thoughts, and don't just necessarily answer the question, because some of it could be kind of a simple answer, but think through it. Why did you answer it that way? What things came out about it that helped you to come to that answer, those types of things. And what we'll do is take a few minutes, let you go through that, and then we'll go around. And again, no cord, so everybody's probably going to get a chance to participate in this one. So go ahead, and I'll let Larissa read the question for those of you online.
So for those of you online, you're looking at Mark chapter 16, and the question is, we are called to go into the world and share the gospel with everyone. How are you taking part in fulfilling the Great Commission?
How we doing? We generated a lot of conversation. Is everybody ready? Who wants to start out and read their question and generate some conversation about it? Don't everybody volunteer at one time? I think I lost the whole crowd. All right, Darlene, you ready? Hold on. It's coming to you.
All right, our group was probably like a lot of other groups, and we had a lot of good conversation. This isn't necessarily in any kind of order, but that's right. We all had different questions. We are commanded to take up our cross daily and follow Christ. What does taking up your cross and denying yourself look like in your life? So we came up with starting your day in the Lord, setting the tone, walking with the Lord fully each day, self-sacrificing, be a light wherever you go, be intentional. And we talked about me versus we and how we have to start with me, the disciplines of a godly life, and not doing things in our own strength, but in God's strength, and to be humble and vulnerable, not my way, but God's way.
Thank you. Who's next? You make eye contact with the teacher, you get picked. Oh, Heidi, you did it. I saw it.
I was laughing at you. She's actually our spokesman.
You get the microphone.
Read this here first. Ours was chapter 12. The greatest commandment is that we love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is that we love others as ourselves. We don't always wake up in the morning ready to love God and others the way we should. How can we center our thoughts and minds on obeying these two greatest commandments every morning? And I just first said, this helps because you center your morning when you we go through the Bible first. We're thinking of God first, and then I said I was listening to somebody who said, just like the Pharaoh who said, "You Israelites, what time away? You must not have enough work to do. I will give you more work to do," and that sometimes we enslave ourselves because we pile things on ourselves that maybe we don't need to do. And so
We just talked too about like prioritizing this and how you have to make it a priority, especially, when we're working, we have families that demand so much of our time. You have to really make it intentional and focus on that. And we also talked about how, as far as like loving your neighbors, we're really fortunate. The area that we live in is, we kind of we're in an area that seems to be kind of the belief of everybody. It's easy to do in this area, I guess you could say. So.
And another thing is that daily Bible reading and prayer, sometimes that prayer for me is hourly, and even the daily reminder for myself too is just hourly, and just going on your day's planning, sometimes how God will intervene for me and change my plans to the way he thinks they should be.
Thank you. Who's next? Oh, you made eye contact, but you did raise your hand, so you're in big trouble.
We were reading from Mark chapter 13, and our question was, we are called to watch for the coming of the Lord because we do not know the day nor the hour of his return. How are you watching for Jesus' return? And so we talked a little bit about just some of the reminders we see in our daily lives today about the coming of the Lord, and a lot of it's laid out there in chapter 13. And we see and hear about events that are happening today that make it feel imminent, like it's going to happen soon. But then we also talked about how does that change the way we actually live? If we actually know the Lord's coming is imminent, and it could be any day, are we living any differently, or does that just cause us to grumble and complain and be scared, or does that cause us to want to shudder up and kind of live in a hole and live, just wait for the storm to pass? Or does that cause us to have a greater sense of urgency to share our faith and to proclaim the gospel of Christ that we know to be true, and to be the only means of salvation from the coming storm? Because if it's not, if the knowledge that his coming is imminent, if that's not spurning us to get out there and work, I don't know what else could. So we kind of discussed that for a couple of minutes.
Our 12-year-old just got a phone for Christmas. It's a big deal, right? And we picked him up from youth group. I picked him up from youth group on Wednesday, and they must have discussed like social media and what distracts us in our lives. And he told me, he's 12, I'm sure this will change probably next week, but he told me, he said, I don't need social media because that will just distract me and not lead me on the path I'm supposed to be on. So we'll see how long that lasts, but so far so good. Not sure how my 15-year-old would feel about that, but we'll see. Over here now, you're all that's left. No, they haven't, but I'm here.
I could say you're the oldest, and I know that's a lie. I won't.
So ours was Mark chapter 9. Jesus said, all things are possible for the one that believes. Do you believe the impossible for your life? And how have you seen God work through your belief? So we kind of talked about that God doesn't like us in our comfort zone, that he will push you out of your comfort zone, but that's where we grow. I kind of gave part of my story, that we were called to be missionaries. So we sold everything, sold our house, pulled the kids out of school, did all these things that to the world seems, that's stupid, that's impossible. But when you put God first, it is possible. We can do all things through him. For us, that fell through, which was a hard thing. And it took us a while to get through and get over. But continuing to put God first, continuing to seek godly counsel, he kind of revealed to us what we helped do, which was shut down an organization that should not have been an organization. And if it weren't for us following the call and seeking him, they might still be in business today. I'm not saying this was easy at all, and it took a while, but God put us back into a place where, God, if you called us again, we'd do it again. So it's just, out of your comfort zone, trusting in him. God will provide. God gives you power.
Thank you. Who back here would like to speak?
We had Mark chapter 7. Today we are reminded to do things for the simple love of God and not because they are simply tradition. Is there something that you have always done because you thought it was right, only to discover that it was a tradition and not God's law? So we talked a little bit about, focusing on why you're doing the things that you're doing and making sure that you are focusing on God and not on, the trappings of the world. We picked a little bit on Christmas as an example, and it is so easy, particularly at that time of year, to fall into the worldly trappings and focus more on the worldly things and giving God just that little snippet of time and attention to the reason. We all say, oh, Jesus is the reason for the season, but we only give him this much, and we give the world this much. So, just when you're following those, traditions, make sure that you're following it for the right reason and not just simply because it's for the tradition.
Thank you. Any other comments about Mark? I found these questions on Friday, and I wish I would have found them before I read Mark, because I think it would have been a whole different experience, because I think sometimes I'm very new to reading the Bible. I think I was supposed to read it in college, but I don't think I did the whole thing. But I think if I would have had those questions in front of me, it would have made a lot more sense. So maybe looking back at that, or and literally I just found these. I just started typing in like discussion questions, and one just popped up, and I was like, oh, that was pretty easy. So I'd encourage you to do that before you would read the whole chapter. Just have kind of a guideline to look at. Chris and I are reading it with our son. Our daughter wanted to do it on her own, so we're reading it with our son, and I don't know. I think he's getting some things out of it, but he is enjoying the routine. I think he enjoys the time with the two of us more than anything, but we're trying to make it a routine. We'll see how long it lasts.
I just had a comment because there was a text or an email or something from Trent about how easy it is, because the flip side of that is that if you don't make the time to do that, just coming to this gathering, and even if just one question about one chapter, you dig a little deeper, it actually can have a strong impact as well. So I appreciate you looking for the questions, and I appreciate this time, because I read them, but I didn't like reflect on whatever at the time. But this is at least an opportunity to spend one chunk of time on one question in one chapter, and that's a good thing.
Just since we're in this forum right now, and I know Trent does a great job of this too, we know, we have a handful of people here, and we wish we could have more. And in our table with our question being about taking up the cross of the Lord, and how to do that, you have to be living a godly, disciplined life yourself in order to take up your cross and try to impact others. And I've talked to pretty many people about coming to this forum, and I'm getting people reply, it's not the format I like. I don't want to have to get in a round table and talk to other people. And I tell them, it's not threatening. If you are a quiet, more introverted person, it's okay. Nobody's going to force you to talk. You can listen and grow in the space that you want, even if it's a round table. So the reason I'm saying that is just try to encourage other people, because they are fearful of that. And if we can help them, say, hey, come with me, sit with me. It's just a reminder.
Thanks, Darlene. Yeah, if you think sitting at the round table while this is going on is a little bit intimidating, come on up. Step on up here. But no, thanks for all of the comments. I did want to we've got a few minutes left here, and because I can't get feedback from online, I'm going to ask you guys to speak a little bit into the question for the online audience, which was from Mark chapter 16. And their question was, we are called to go into the world and share the gospel with everyone. How are you taking part in fulfilling that commission, the Great Commission? Anybody have a couple of quick thoughts on that? Patty?
I think it's just being open to an opportunity that the Lord might set before you, and to be intentional. Like over the time standing in Walmart in the checkout line, was somebody turned to me and started talking, and just to share with them a little bit, and then to hear, thank you, I needed that. Yesterday I had an opportunity to talk with somebody to encourage them because their wife has cancer. Are you going to take the time when that time is given to you that the Lord's appointing? So I think it's just a daily thing of being aware, and then to engage with people as it's put there in front of you, as the Lord gives it to you.
Will you repeat your question first?
Yeah, I got to go back up here.
I want to gather my thoughts about it before I question. I know what I want to say, but...
So the question was, we are called to go into the world and share the gospel with everyone. How are you taking part in fulfilling the Great Commission?
I think we all do that differently, and we shouldn't compare ourselves, first off. For myself, God has presented me with more one-on-one. I like one-on-one, getting with people, and that way I feel like you can go deeper, sometimes be more vulnerable, but again, take the opportunities that you have. And also, sometimes we get opportunities we really don't want. We see things happen, and we're like, I wish I wasn't in this. But God puts us in it, and then He guides us to what He wants us to do.
Anybody else? Got one over here.
I went to school to be a teacher, like Larissa, and I think that you learn that everything can be a teaching moment. And so if we choose to see the teaching moment be about God, it's amazing the lessons He will give you. It's though He's waiting up there for you to, have this open door where you can see Him. And it doesn't have to be through the scriptures. We know that He's everywhere. We know that He's in all creation. He just is everywhere. Yesterday, Jenny was driving back from Livy's basketball game, and we saw 2 bald eagles on the side of the road. And so she's got this car with little ones in it, and so your mind, you can train your mind to, when you see a bald eagle, when you see somebody at a grocery store that you can come with a response that glorifies God, that makes them maybe thirsty, desiring. We're hoping to throw these little darts all the time into people that make them hungry and thirsty for what we know will satisfy their needs and whatever.
All right. Thanks, Larita. You're okay. I couldn't tell if that was a raised hand or.
I think I would just share a practical example that God has given me an opportunity. We have team meetings on Wednesdays, and we have thorns and roses, and God just says, okay, this situation's happening, and I was able to share a Right Now Media little clip, and just to speak into that situation in a different way. And I think opportunities when you're serving children, to be able to just invite them and their families when you see a need, a spiritual need as well as a practical need, to say, hey, this is available in our community. Did you know Wednesday nights were happening? And so, yeah.
All right. So we are oh, sorry, Chris.
This can be just really quick, but this is actually my job, is to mobilize people for cross-cultural mission. And even though that's not everybody's job, we can please pray. Because as I go to places like a missions conference at Cedarville or a medical missions conference in Louisville, that God will help me be sensitive to people who I can connect to and continue their journey. So I'm just asking for prayer because it's my job.
Yeah, I think God will speak to you as an individual about how you participate in it. The question is, are you paying attention and participating when He calls you, where He calls you, when He calls you? So with that, we are just about out of time. Larissa, anything additional from you? I did want to make a really quick note. One of the things with reading the Psalms readings that we had this week that I was able to pick up on, at least in my own thought process, there's a lot of parallels going on there to the things like the God's wrath against those who schemed against the king at the time, and then you look at how God was dealing with Pharaoh and then the Israelites, and then in Mark with Jesus and the way that He's going to deal with them. That in chapter 21, David talked about being forsaken by God, ridiculed by the people, and all the parallels there that were in parallel with the way Jesus was treated all the way through up to the crucifixion, those types of things. Just noting the parallels as we're reading these things together in 1 week, it kind of stitches them together. Anything else? We got about half a minute left. All right. Well, thanks again for being here this morning, and we hope to see you back next week.